Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Global Renaissance Podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Barron. I have a special guest. You're our first blue check, so shout out to you. Katrina Kincade, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Now, Katrina, you do quite a number of things.
Yeah.
TV reporter. You have a nomination for something on that, or award? You won something.
Yes. So I have a Mass Broadcasters Award as well as a Student Production Emmy from the National Capital Emmy. Thank you. Thank you.
You've also competed in a few pageants.
A few, you could say.
We got the crown here. Y'all see it later. And then you're a huge mental health advocate. So we're definitely going to get into all of that. But first and foremost, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So what I want to start with, I think the most fitting thing to start with is be your broadcast career, seeing as I love to be on camera. You're on camera all the time. It just makes sense.
It does make sense.
First of all, I know a little bit. You went to school down in D.C., but can you tell us how you got into broadcasting?
Yeah, so I always wanted to be a TV news reporter since I was a kid. Like, kids who knew me as a kid remember me apparently, like, trying to interview them on the bus about their homework. Like, I'd be like, so how was your homework today? Like, I don't remember that, though. I don't remember that. But, like, people who sat next to me do. And it was a thing in my house. We'd watch the news at night, and I don't know what sparked me wanting to do it. My dad did have the longest running cable access talk show in Boston for a long time. And when I was like 9 or 8, he brought me on. Yeah. So I got that little taste of TV and live TV. But then at one point I just decided I wanted to be a TV news reporter. I was like, I'm going to do it. So I made sure to go to one of the best schools. I wanted to come back to Massachusetts, started working at 22 News. And my goal was always to become a Boston news reporter and to be the person that I watched on TV to add a little diversity, a little spice to what I didn't see when I was growing up.
For sure. So your dad, was that like a conscious thing of like being able to see like, okay, my dad's doing this is something I want to follow in those footsteps, or was it more of one of those subconscious things that looking back you really realized the impact that it had and kind of guiding you there? What was that influence of him being there doing what you ended up wanting to do? What was the influence there?
I think it was subconscious. I think it was the fun that I saw my dad having and the personality he got to bring to TV, and he would bring me to the studio all the time. Like, even if he didn't have me as the guest, so to speak, he'd bring me just to watch it, and I'd be behind the scenes watching. I'd get to shadow the camera person. So I think just growing up in that sphere of broadcast, I just wanted to do it. And there was a part of me that thought it was so cool, but I knew I wanted to have a talk show when I was a kid, like my dad. And I think that just, I wasn't about to be Oprah. I wasn't going to get a talk show. So I kind of combined my love of watching the news with my family with watching my dad and thought, okay, I want to turn that into kind of a career somehow in some way.
Do you remember your first time like being on camera?
Yes.
How did that go?
My dad's trying to find the tapes right now, actually. It went terribly. Makes I was like 8, and my dad told them, so you know how a lot of times you'll have the monitor so you can see yourself? Yeah. My dad was like, turn it off. She loves herself too much.
I feel that.
You know, we like to be on camera.
As you should.
No, I knew that from a young age. I was a performer. So, my dad was like, turn it off because she'll freeze if she sees herself on TV. And I saw and it was a live show too. This is back when it was live. And I saw myself on that camera and I was like, and my dad like pushes my head out the thing. I started going into his frame. If I saw it was on his, I started being like, and then I started, you know, I started playing with my microphone, being like, is this thing on? Like, it was a whole mess, and I was there to read about Alzheimer's books. Yeah.
I mean, you can't expect much from an 8-year-old.
What are you gonna exactly? What are you gonna expect from an 8-year-old?
I'm sure everybody thought it was adorable.
I'm sure. The next one, which he found the video of a couple of days ago, I was 9 or 10. That one was a little more professional. Yeah, I really cleaned it up for that one a little bit.
That's dope though. You had a very, very early start, because I feel like most people that I've talked to don't like. First of all, most people don't like being on camera. Which, do I understand that? No. But I guess most people just aren't comfortable with it. But you had a head start, so I don't even think that was something that you ever even went through your mind. Now, the decision you said you wanted to go to one of the best schools for journalism.
Yep.
Where did you go? Why did you end up going there? And how was your time?
I went to American University in D.C. I went there because I knew I wanted to stay in the Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
I did not want to go to the South, the West. I wanted to stay. I love Boston so much. I wanted to stay relatively near my family, too. So picked AU because I had literally just Googled that it was one of the top best journalism schools, and my guidance counselor had told me.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I didn't have the best grades, but I forced that school to admit me.
Mm-hmm.
I submitted a fake reel of news clips that I did around my school.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote articles. I made them interview me, even though they were like, we don't do interviews. I was like, you're going to interview me.
As you should.
You're going to interview me, though. As
you should.
And then I got it. So, because my grades weren't there,
Mm-hmm.
I was having some mental health issues, which led me to have a lower GPA. But then I was like, I'm going to make up everything else, because ultimately, in my industry, your GPA didn't matter.
Yeah.
So my time at AU was intriguing. There were a lot of racial incidents that happened almost every single year I was there. When it comes to the academic side of it, I think I got an amazing education. I still am close with my professors, and I still talk to their classes about the real world and things. So I think it was a great educational experience for broadcast journalism. I was right next to NBC Washington, where I got an internship. It was awesome. The social experience of it was a little complex, is what I will say.
So what year did you graduate college?
I graduated in 2019.
Okay, so pretty recent. Talk about some of so from your perspective, right?
Yep.
Because I remember when I was a sophomore in high school, so you graduated in 2019, so I think you were a senior in high school. But you remember that it was like the beginning of the year was like the Ferguson stuff, and then the spring was like the Baltimore stuff. So there was a lot of like social unrest, right? And that was one of those things that you start seeing a lot of information on the news. You're getting information on social media. From your perspective as somebody who was interested in being a news reporter and kind of covering these types of events, when that level of racial strife happens on your campus, how do you respond? Do you think it was different than your average student who may just be like, okay, this is happening? Were you taking a different angle to it? Were you like, okay, I want to get some more insight into this? Or was it just like, okay, this is something that I have to deal with?
I think it was that second one, or the middle one, where I was thinking of it in a journalistic way a lot of times. Of course, there was the emotional side of it, being a Black person and being in that and taking in what was happening. But I also have, which annoys some of my family members a lot, a journalistic intuition to want to know so much more of the situation. So while I'm seeing protests, I'm also looking at different news outlets to figure out every detail of the story that I can, so that I am able to be like, well, this also happened. So how did that factor from his background influence X, Y, and Z? So it's hard, because in journalism, you try not to be emotional and you try to be non-biased. But I think a large and hard part of that was going to journalism school, being in a journalistic sphere, while also having to navigate my own emotions as a Black woman, dealing with the emotional trauma of everything that was happening at the time. So, and that continues today, right? Like, that hasn't really slowed down, the racial injustice. So, especially being a real news reporter now, balancing going to Black Lives Matter protests and reporting on Black Lives Matter protests, or if there's any racial instances that happened in Western Massachusetts, I want to know everything. I want to know why this person defends this person and why this happened, so that I'm able to tell the full story and not just the background of it. And I like to think that a lot of that comes from the fact that I have a sociology minor, and I was always interested in sociology and the way that groups of people interacted with each other. And that's where I kind of go into my journalism with, is looking at, especially when it comes to like racial justice, diversity, and community stories, is looking at not just what happened, like the crime. Let's take riots, for example. That, not just, oh, there is a riot or there is looting, but what is the socioeconomics behind why that is happening, and explaining that as well. Because I think a lot of times the news can be very, people are doing this, end story, and doesn't get into the people are doing this because socioeconomically X, Y, and Z led them to do that. And so it's a complex world, but I try to navigate it as best as I can from a non-biased standpoint. But also, I feel like when we talk and you talk to people, they want to hear your emotions and your real human beingness.
For sure.
And that's what's important about diversity in media as well, is is being that black woman who can kind of go into why and X, Y, and Z.
And I think one of the reasons why I'm so interested in the media space in general is because I think those who control the narrative control how people think.
Yep.
And so for you being on the side of, okay, you're going to be the one presenting this information, how do you go about it trying to maintain a level of neutrality, going and deciphering what information is important to present, what information do I have to leave out, and then also navigating this idea of like headlines, right? Like I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed. People just read headlines. They're not going to watch the rest of the clip. They're not going to read the rest of the story. So whatever you say first to capture their attention is what they're going on.
Yep.
How do you navigate all of these different things while still trying to portray an impartial story?
Yeah, I am the biggest criminal of the too long headline because I want you to try to get the whole gist in the headline and not just click it.
Yeah.
Or the person here, if my headline isn't as detailed as it needs to be, because you got to think about SEO, and when it comes to optimizing search engine stuff, it can't be too long of a headline, but you want people to click it. But because, to be honest, clicks run sales, clicks run money, clicks run how I get paid. And so you have a responsibility to get accurate information in said headline, but also there is a push to get people to click on the article and hopefully read through it. So the unbiased part to me just comes from breaking down something so easily. I like to say, tell me it like I'm a 5-year-old. And if you explain something to somebody in a conversational, both sides way, you gotta also remember we have multiple hits. So I can talk about different things in each hit, and that's kind of how I put all the information into one whole story. I try to break it down in a way where no matter what side you're on, you at least understand the other person's side of it. And I think that if I can at least in my news stories give you a glimpse of why somebody else might be thinking that, even if you disagree, you can't say that you never understood it.
Yeah.
And it's hard in a headline. So I try sometimes to be a little vague so that when you click it, you can be like, okay, this person said this person thinks this or whatever. But it's hard because a lot of times, like I won't lie, like there'll be, especially racial justice things where I will tend to lean towards and lean into the side of racial justice. And because I see it as someone with a sociology minor, someone as a black woman, I'm able to a lot of times take a more educational stance and educate people and the majority of our viewers, a lot of times who are white, on why X, Y, and Z is happening. So my biggest thing is that at least you can't ever say you didn't know. And that's how I try to kind of navigate the non-biased part of it.
Have you ever gotten like an extreme amount of pushback from any like story you reported on? Maybe someone thought you weren't being as impartial as maybe you were given their position. Have you ever received a significant amount of pushback, or for the most part it's been smooth sailing?
I wouldn't say pushback as much as I've received counter arguments. Like there were definitely some very politically heavy things in Western Massachusetts when I worked there that, and granted, I hadn't been there I was only there for almost 3 years. So there's a lot of history of why some people don't like each other, why some people X, Y, and Z that I didn't know. But so I remember going into one situation that had to do with some guy who was the head of some racial justice organization. He did not like either the mayor or the police of somewhere because of an incident that had happened like 20 years ago in the city with a police officer. And I remember being like, well, and hearing him, and I interviewed him, and then I read about what happened, and I was like, okay, well, it does kind of seem like this guy has a point enough to be angry at what happened, and because he knows the cop from 20 years ago and whatever. And I remember a producer of mine being like, well, that person's always thinking this, and this person has always leaned towards anti-cop. So you have to take what they say with a grain of salt. And I was like, no, it seems pretty clear here. I'm going to take their opinion and their emotions fully and decipher from that what is the truth, not just take it with a grain of salt. And I remember that being a conversation where I was like, okay, clearly I can tell you're biased in this because you're pushing back on me, pushing this guy's racial narrative and the racial justice narrative. You don't want me to push that hard because you don't agree with what he's saying. But I think he at least deserves equal airtime as the other person. So no pushback in the sense where I was like, I want to do a story on the racial maternity rate and black women dying, at more rates with maternal deaths than white women. And they were like, what? No. Not in that sense. But when it comes to politics of wherever you're reporting, I have gotten pushback because I come in as the person with no knowledge of anybody's history. And I just want to demolish everything and just tell the truth. And people are like, but you got to understand that this person doesn't like this person because of blah, 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 blah. So it's just, and that's anywhere you go, is that if you're the new kid who doesn't know anything about people's backstories, people are going to want to give you their little insight and tell you why maybe you shouldn't do that.
What's the process of deciding like what stories you're covering and then on the back end, what goes and airs?
Yeah. So stories you cover is you pitch stories. So I usually would pitch my stories if I have story ideas based off of something I saw in the paper, something I know from somebody I know in the community. I'll pitch it. Or there will be stories of the day. So we get press releases from organizations all over who tell us like, hey, the governor's going to be at the YMCA to give a check to this organization or something like that. And then that's a story we would cover. Pretty much what happened at my last station, the way it would work is there was a list of stories to do in the day, and there's only so many reporters. And so they're pretty much listed from importance in terms of what has to be done today, because whatever it is, say the governor is only here today. Whatever's only happening today, whatever is newsworthy of that day and might not be as relevant the next day, down to like fluffier stories. And that's kind of what's picked is I would go in as the morning reporter and I'd look at the list and say, I want that story. And if it was on the list, then it was a fine story to do. But it's pretty much space and time because you only have so much time in a newscast to put so much stuff.
No, that makes sense. I remember my parents were huge news watchers.
Why is it like...
I don't know.
That generation loved the news.
They loved the news because I would remember going to school as a kid. We're listening to NPR. Like, that's it. I'm not listening to no music. Nope. We're listening to NPR. And I would get home, and my mom's sitting in the living room watching, like, MSNBC or something. I'm just like...
Local news.
Have you not gotten enough information?
Never.
Do you feel like being a reporter, you ever get this information overload? Because for me, I totally feel like we are inundated with a massive amount of information, which probably we aren't designed to be able to intake.
No, I don't think we are.
So for you having to actually not only see it, but then produce this stuff and really dive deep into the information that you're going to then present. Do you ever feel like overwhelmed by the amount of information you're intaking?
Absolutely. I don't have cable. I don't watch the news. And that, my boss and people might hate me for that, but
No, it makes sense.
I don't watch the news. I mean, I look at the news in terms of I go on the websites and I'll look at the top stories and I'll look at the local community stories. But personally, as a news reporter, I can't report the news all day and then go home and watch the news. I already know what happened because I already had it on the day sheet. So I already saw what the news is going to be. And a lot of times the topics are things that I already know relatively about. So I get the majority of my news from, like, let's say Twitter. But I'll have to take a Twitter break because I follow so many great local journalists from around the country. As I'll be like, I'll text my boyfriend and be like, oh my God, did you know there was a mass shooting in insert random little town here? And he'll be like, no. And I'm like, oh, how crazy. This happened and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, chill. Like, chill. This happened like 3,000 miles away. Like, please. And I'll be like, but it was crazy though. Like, isn't that a crazy situation? And he's like, you have too much news. So I think if I were to even watch it on TV more than election season or something big or like confirmation hearings or something big where I wanted to watch it on TV, I would have way too much because just going on Twitter, I obviously curated my feed to be a bunch of local journalists. That can sometimes be overwhelming when I just want to look at funny tweets from like Black Twitter. And I see all of a sudden there was like 10,000 shootings in DC that weekend. I'm like, it can be too much. It can definitely be too much. But I think navigating it has been very much, I've been practicing work-life balance, which is very hard in my industry, but I've been practicing once I leave the building, once my shift is over, I make conscious efforts to look at news versus going on sites I know will show me the news. Yeah. That
makes sense. And that's important for your mental health. And that's actually a perfect pivot to what I wanted to talk about with that. Like I said, you've been a huge mental health advocate. I know you do your Instagram lives.
Yep, Mental Health Mondays.
So talk about kind of your journey kind of taking care of your own mental health because again, mental health is a buzzword. Everybody says
Everybody.
it. But what does that
health.
mean on an individual level? And what has your journey been like discovering, like, hey, this is something I actually have to take care of? I think we all have that moment where, like, oh, I can't just, like, say everything's good. Like,
right.
I really got to take care of this. So what was that moment where you're like, okay, I really need to take my mental health seriously? And then what has been the process of you figuring that out? And then how did you become such a major advocate for it?
So I went to a mental hospital in high school. And I had not even really a breakdown. I had a breaking point one night in high school. I believe it was my sophomore year. And I remember doing my homework. I was on my bedroom floor doing my homework. And I just remember thinking that I couldn't do it anymore. Yeah. And I bless my mom's heart, because I remember just going over to her room and being like, can you take me to the ER? And she was like, what's wrong? And I was like, just take me to the ER. And she's like, oh, okay. And took me to the ER. And I remember I had friends and acquaintances who went to mental hospitals. Yeah. So I was aware of the fact that if you were really struggling mentally, like, there was a place you could potentially go to get help. And I was in therapy because my parents were separated and I had boy problems all in high school. But even so, my therapist didn't really know that I was struggling with anxiety and depression. And I remember that night that the nurse and the doctor in the ER were like, yeah, we're going to have you go 2 weeks to a mental hospital and basically upend your whole life because you have, like, major depression and general anxiety disorder, from what we can currently tell. That's unchecked. And so I went to a mental hospital for 2 weeks. They said the same thing, that I was anxious and depressed. And everyone was shocked. And everyone was surprised. I remember my therapist calling me in the mental hospital being like, what happened? Why did I not know? How did we get here? And I was really great at putting up a front of I had so many expectations from so many people. I was in plays. I was going to be a news reporter. I had started looking into pageants. I was a star kid of the program that I was in. And I think that I had this perception of myself that if I ruined it for other people and told other people I was struggling, then I had failed. And that just got to me really, really badly. And I think when I was in the mental hospital, I remember switching my ideology from what if things go really badly? And that's what was preventing me from doing a lot of things and responding to emails from teachers too. But what if this goes really well? And this could be a really great thing, actually, for you. And it was then that I realized that I needed to prioritize, no matter what, my mental health going forward for the rest of my life. And it was a struggle. Like, in college, I brought my cat to college as a therapy animal to help me with the transition. And I still did not. I was on academic probation my, like, first semester in college, despite the fact I fought for them to let me in. I was on academic probation because I was working, like, 2 jobs to pay for this expensive freaking college and my apartment and all these things. And I plummeted. And I remember, again, having to check myself and be like, Katrina, like, you will drop out of college. You will fail everything you've worked for if you don't take care of yourself first and prioritize yourself, because you can't be your best self for other people. You can't be the best reporter you want to be, the best student you want to be, if you can't do your work, if you can't send an email to a professor. And I think after that, going forward, I was like, well, we need to talk about it more, because I think too many people, from just sharing my story, I have learned were in the same position as me, where they had a front put up because they thought they were afraid to let people down, and they didn't want people to see that they were not the strong Black woman, strong friend that people thought they were. And I have made a point now of normalizing that conversation. And I just go with people all the time, and I'll be like, yeah, when I was in the loony bin, the food was not good. And people will be like, you will what? What'd you just say? What'd you just say? I think the more we talk about it casually and conversationally, the less stigma it has around it. And I think that happening to me when I was in high school, and knowing so many other people it happened to, I think there was like 5 kids in my class alone who went to mental hospitals. I was like, we have to talk about this normally, because there's so many people currently struggling quietly. And especially when, perfect example recently, like Chesley, the Miss USA, who committed suicide. Like, there's so many people who are amazing people you would never think are struggling inside, who are, that I think a big problem is that we just don't talk about it enough. And that moment when I was in high school really, really catapulted me forward to be like, I'm just going to talk about it. Because if I don't, like I can hope, my only hope is that by me talking about it just a little bit, somebody else will talk about it to someone else, and I'll get the ball rolling, and that's what kind of jumped off Mental Health Mondays and things like that. Yeah,
that's super important. So I think you mentioned two important things. One, there's this idea, and I remember seeing this quote on like Instagram or Twitter or something like that. Like, you can't pour from an empty cup. So I think you pointed to this struggle. I kind of think of it like a high achiever struggle, where when people think you are on top of it in a certain area, which you probably are, right? You knew what you wanted to do. You were very driven. You seem like you have a very outgoing personality, which I think doesn't help when people.
It does not help.
It doesn't help.
It doesn't help at all.
People always think you're good because you come off as good. Like, I like to crack jokes. I like to have a good time, but I might not be doing so good. But it's just like, hey, man, it is what it is, right? So I think that's a super important thing to mention, that just because someone seems like they're okay doesn't mean they are.
Right.
And the second thing is that taking breaks, quote unquote, is productive. That was one thing. I've been a productivity fiend for a very long time.
I like that.
Where I feel like if I'm not doing something, whether it be school, I never really cared about school that much, so I was pretty good at it.
I mean, you went to Harvard,
Hey, you know, but it was like, if I'm not doing something, whether it be practicing, I'm a drummer, right? Be practicing drums, working on something, right? I feel bad about myself. But sometimes you really need to take a step back and really just take a break. And it actually helps you perform at a higher level. So I think that's something super important. But I do want you to speak a little bit more on the pressures of being somebody that people look at as somebody who does well. Because like you said, if you're the type of person where people have always known you to be a certain way and they've always kind of projected you to go places, people start putting hope in you and put stock in you. And so you have this not only internal pressure of wanting to succeed, but you have other people in your community and your family who want to see you succeed, and that's going to help them. So what is that pressure like, and how do you navigate both the internal and the external pressure?
Yeah, I call it the gifted child problem. Yeah. Is that the kid who was put into the gifted child program as a kid because somebody saw the spark in them, and then they forced them on a track that they just had to keeping up because they couldn't let everybody else down, is the same kind of world. It's a lot, as you said, when people have expectations of you, because even though we can say as many times, just be proud of yourself and just be on your own journey, you can't deny when people look up to you, when people want to be you, want to do that. So internally, the way that I handle it, I do what you say, I take breaks. I have do nothing days, and sometimes my boyfriend hates me for them because I'll tell him to leave me alone. And I just don't do anything. It's I will have a day where I just want to watch dumb reality TV and do things for myself that day, because a lot of my job and me is working for other people. My last station's motto was working for you. And so I think from an internal standpoint, to deal with that is me thinking I can't work for other people if I'm not working for myself first. And for me, that means taking days to just watch TV, taking mental health days from work to get my administrative stuff done. Because if you think about the cycle of work is so crazy sometimes that you wake up at, let's say 7 o'clock, let's say you have a 9 to 5. You wake up at 7 o'clock, you go to work for 8 hours, it's 5 o'clock, you come home, you cook yourself dinner, maybe watch a TV show, go to bed over and over and over again. And you are working for somebody else. A lot of us are. And that can be so much pressure to perform at that level and do whatever else you're doing and do that cycle that you need days to just stop, to just be in yourself. And I know that there are schools that are now implementing mental health days for students that they can just take unabashedly because of that, because there's so many of the gifted children who need those type of days. And from an outside perspective, it's just being honest with people. It's just talking to people. And I think that can be really scary. And I remember, one, it's about the culture that you're in. So let's take my last workplace, for example. How many times you go into work and someone's like, hey, how are you? And you're like, I'm great. And that's it, you know? And whether that be because you don't feel comfortable telling the person, you know, I'm having a terrible day. You don't think it's professional to tell somebody I'm not having a great day. We do that so often that, one, that will impact that person's perception of you if constantly every single day you're like, I'm having a great time, Joe. And they're going to expect that from you. And I think outwardly is not being afraid if someone asks you how you're doing to be like, I've had better days. I could be better. Not that great. At work, I'd be like, I don't know. Right now, I like to find the top floor of this building. That. I started doing that at work. They'd be like, what? I was like, they'd be like, do you want to do this? I'd be like, I'd rather find the second floor. And they would, like, but just like that, even that jokingly, which like suicide is not a joke, but like just jokingly, it just breaks it down. You know what I mean? Makes people laugh at the fact that we don't all have good days. And I think breaks down that perception. And I know that, like, now for my dad, for example, will be somebody who's like, oh, how you doing? And I'll be like, not great, Dad. And he'll be like, okay. But at least he knows, you know? And I think it's really just being more honest with people, which I admit for myself is hard. There are so many people that I will just be like, oh, I'm great. Everything's peachy. Couldn't be better. And it's not. But I think that the more of us individually who break down that, the more we can be comfortable with not being okay and normalizing that, so that the gifted child feels comfortable not being okay and talking about it, so they're not struggling so much internally and having high functioning depression because they're just going and performing and doing their thing and not having time for themselves and not feeling like they're heard by other people, because it's so easy in this profession to speak and to speak for others and tell other people's stories, but to not tell your own because you feel like that's not as important as the work you're doing.
I want to pivot to your, pageant. I don't know if you call it work, but,
the pageantry.
Yeah, that's always been something that I'm a guy. There are pageants for guys. There might be
pageants for guys.
I just don't know about them.
We'll get you on.
No, thank you. But it's always been an interesting thing to me, like, because you see like Miss USA and Miss Universe and this and that, and you're like, I really don't know what they do.
Right.
So can you tell us, what do you do? So you were Miss Cambridge.
I am currently Miss Cambridge.
You're currently Miss Cambridge.
I was Miss North Shore before that, and I made top 10 at Miss Massachusetts.
Go ahead.
I've won about $2,000 in scholarship money.
Go ahead.
So, we're doing great. I've been doing pageants since I was a teenager. For me, for the Miss America organization, it's about scholarships for me. I am in debt, like $160,000 of debt.
Joe, what we doing? Joe, what we doing?
I've been saying this on Twitter once a month.
Kamala's like your soror, right? So I feel like you should just call her line.
Soror, what are we doing? I'll find you in the directory.
Make it happen.
So, I don't know what's happening with that, and I don't like it, quite frankly, but I have a lot of debt. So, the Miss America organization is one of the largest scholarship providers of women around the country, and I'm not just saying that because it's a line we all say. It's just genuinely true. Yeah. And so, like, Miss Massachusetts she paid off all her undergrad debt by winning Miss Massachusetts and then going to Miss America and making top 3 at Miss America. It's insanity. So, one, I compete for that. But 2, what's really big for me, and is also a reason why I'm an AKA now, is I love community service. And I love going to speak to people about causes that matter to me, like mental health. A really big one that I talk about is representation in media, and also Special Olympics and neurodiversity, because my brother, I've been volunteering with Special Olympics for 15 years. My brother has autism, and we've been involved with that. So for me, my day-to-day, when it comes to the crown and pageantry, isn't just like parades and waving, although I love a parade, is community service, is hitting up organizations to see how I can help improve the community, because I have my ideas of how I want to benefit the communities I grew up in, the communities I'm a part of, but those can't go anywhere if the organizations that are doing the work don't have enough volunteers and don't have enough funding. So what I try to do is raise money. I just raised with my team over $1,000 for Special Olympics. So I do things so that organizations that I care about, causes that I care about, can keep doing their work. And also so I can pay off my debt. Yeah, that's my day to day.
As you should. How does one even get into pageantry? How do you just you just go sign up?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you literally just sign up. I remember as a teenager, I was a little more confused about it, so I did things that weren't Miss America organization, like I did Miss United States, I did Black USA, until I always wanted to be Miss America though. So when I was in college, I think I got an email randomly from the Miss America, Miss DC organization being like, looking for contestants, and I was like, me, it's me, your next Miss America. I lost so horribly. And both years I did it in DC. But It's just signing up. It's just reaching out to a local. So, like Miss Cambridge, Miss Boston is local, or the state organization in DC. They don't have locals. They just have the state competition. Yeah. You just reach out and say, hey, I want to compete.
And then what's the competition process?
What
do you have to do? How do you prepare? Talk to me.
It is a lot. So right now I'm preparing for Miss Massachusetts in July 2nd. Everyone, please come. And
where is it?
It is going to be at the Hanover Theater in Worcester.
Heard.
So first thing I do, there's a talent portion. So I'm a jazz singer, and
can we get a preview of the vocals?
Not of what I'm singing. That isn't publicly available.
Okay, but just sing something.
What did I sing last year? Oh my gosh, what did I sing last year? Wow, what did I do? Oh, all I could do was cry. No, I'd rather go blind. Yeah. Okay, I'll give you a little what I did last year. Something told me it was over when I saw you and that girl talking, yeah.
Go ahead! We love some vocal talent. All right, I need vocal lessons later. We can talk about that after.
we can go through it, yeah.
Because Lord knows I can't sing.
We can get you there. You can maybe scat. You can give me a little like,
you see, I love the belief you have in me.
That's part of my job. Believing
you're doing a great job. You're doing a fantastic job. So you got your talent portion.
So we got talent portion. We were practicing for talent. Then we have a 10-minute interview with the judges. That's what people don't see. So when you see on TV and you're watching Miss America in the finals, and then all of a sudden they call 15 girls out of 50, and you're like, how did they pick those girls? Like, there's a 10-minute interview you have with the judges that isn't shown to the audience, and that's where they get to know everything about you. You have to prepare a resume. You have to prepare basically a paper about whatever social cause you choose to champion for that year. So mine for as Miss Cambridge is because of them we can representation matters, and talking about why representation is important. Because I was the first woman to wear a hijab on TV in Western Massachusetts, and also the first Black woman to wear hair naturally. So for me, being that person, as I said, as I was a little kid, being the reporter I wanted to see as a kid is important to me. So I had to write a whole paper about why I wanted to do that and why the judges should pick me to do that. Then we have onstage question. That's where you're supposed to solve world peace in 30 seconds. That was rough. That was always rough. Not for me, because I usually win it.
Like that.
Not for me, because I won it almost every time. But but for other people,
talk your stuff.
You know, when you talk for a profession, it is. Yeah. It just kind of comes naturally to answer questions.
I'm already knowing. I know.
You know. I know. I could probably ask you. Okay, ready? I will ask you the question I got asked at Massachusetts.
Am I getting interviewed on my own show?
Yes,
this is crazy.
It's not hard. Okay.
Go ahead, turn the tables.
I'm not going to say it's not hard. That would be mean if you don't get it.
I'm nervous now.
Now you know how it feels.
Got me stressing on my own show.
You're about to go out.
It's okay. If I don't get it right, what am I going to do? I'm just going to clip it out. It's fine. It's fine.
What do you think about vaccine mandates at colleges? And do you think that students who don't get the vaccine still deserve to have that education?
Well, I mean, I think it's a matter of safety, right? We've seen vaccine mandates from the time we were probably 5, whether it be school, camp. So I don't think this is absolutely unprecedented now. The difference is that these vaccines are on a different timeline, but we're also in a pandemic. So there's something important that we have to figure out here, and I'm not a scientist, so I can't tell you all the details in terms of the trials and all of that. But what I do know is that there's a health crisis that we have to get under control. And if mandating that students become vaccinated in order to participate fully in on-campus activities is the solution to making sure that everybody's able to have a safe time on campus, then I think that's important, because I was actually on campus when COVID started, and my last 3 semesters were virtual, and the level of education was not the same. So if a few students deciding that they don't want to be vaccinated is going to put the educational attainment of all the students in general at jeopardy, then I think it's important that we do what we need to do to make sure that doesn't happen.
Wonderful. You didn't answer the second part of the question, but your first part was, do you think
that... I don't even remember the second part of the question.
That's what happens on stage, too. They ask you... the one time the worst at is if they're like, tell me 3 qualities that blah, 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 blah should have. And I'll be like, this, and I'll be like, thank you. I can't.
Got one.
Can't think of three. Yeah. No, so I got that question. It was the same thing, and it was that of what do you think of vaccine mandates on college campuses, and do you think that students who don't get the vaccine deserve to still have an education?
Put them on Zoom.
That's what I said.
I do what you gotta do.
I said, if you want to risk your fellow student's life, I don't think you don't deserve education. You got there for a reason. But just maybe a different type of education. That's all. It's okay. That's what. But yeah, you did great. That was a good job.
Catch me on the next pageant.
I give you an 8.
Hey, I'll take it. You
did say
We'll work on it. That was cold. I wasn't even ready. I didn't know I was gonna get asked a question today.
That's true.
Vote for Trevor on the next pageant. All right. I don't know what it'll be.
People's choice.
People's choice. That's me. Anyway.
That's what you are. Yeah.
You know
People's
the vibes.
choice. You could do evening gown. Evening wear. It's actually called red carpet now. You just wear red carpet wear. So like I wear a gown. Some girls would choose to wear like a cute suit.
Do you have to pay for this stuff yourself?
Oh yeah.
Oh I'm out.
I save up.
I'm out on that.
Or secondhand.
I'm out on that. I'm sorry.
You don't got a suit.
I mean, I do, but it's like I'm gonna want to buy a new one. And
who said you have to buy a new one?
But you know how it is when you got like an event, you want to buy a new one.
Yeah.
I know.
That's a good point.
New haul,
That's a good point.
You know.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna lie.
So, based off your time participating, what do you think the difference is between what the competition is actually like versus public perception? Because for me, honestly, I thought all people did at pageants would stand there and look pretty. I didn't know y'all did anything. So what do you think like the disconnect is there?
I think the disconnect is what they used to be. I think it's so many people who are stuck in the old perception of it. Because they used to stand there and look pretty. Mm-hmm. And it used to be a beauty contest, right? Like a beauty pageant. The Miss USA organization is a beauty pageant, and they are their motto is confidently beautiful. They are that, and they embrace that. They don't have a talent section. They are glitz and glam. They are fabulous, and I love that for them. They are what you would think when you think of a beauty pageant, but are also incredibly intelligent and passionate women who are smart and have the same causes that they care about. And then there's the Miss America organization, who became a scholarship organization, I believe, in the 50s. And I think that is the push that the public needs to see more. Mm-hmm. Is I think that they're still caught up in the there she is, Miss America celebrity of it all versus the woman who can be accomplished, who can be pretty, who can be talented all in one, and celebrating that. Because that's where I see a lot of people online who were like, it's 2022 and we're still doing beauty pageants. And it's like, it's so much more than that. I mean, there are women getting their PhDs who are already licensed therapists who are also on stage strutting their butts off in a bikini, playing the piano, not at the same time, but I'm sure they could. And I want that perception to be seen more, because that's where I think the disconnect is. I think people are still wrapped up in the just walking. There are people who don't even know that we got rid of swimsuit. Miss America doesn't do swimsuit anymore. And there are people who don't even know that, or who think, isn't that the one that was owned by Donald Trump? Which that was USA, not America. And I think that what's lacking is the education around the fact that these women are role models. Our current Miss Massachusetts is the first Haitian woman to become Miss Massachusetts. It is a big deal for so many girls to be able to give back to their community. And I think that what is missing is that portion. I think so many people see just the crowning aspect on TV, but don't see the amazing work that these women are doing for their community. And one of my goals is to be so involved in the community that you can't not know that I do more than just walk on stage and sing. Yeah.
I think based off everything you do, I think, like I said earlier, controlling narratives is a super important thing to all of the work that you do. So as kind of a wrap-up question, if there was one big idea or narrative that you could change or push to the fore through whatever means, whether it's something you're doing right now or something you may do down the line, right? What would that be?
Man, that's a great onstage question.
You really
hit me. If there's one narrative I could change
or push to the fore, maybe one that's not being talked about that you would like to see talked about more, or one that you would like to change.
I would just like to emphasize, I think, the importance of representation. I think that is one that is talked about in a very commercialized way. I think I see a lot of times people talk about representation, and you'll see, I remember this picture of that little boy who watched Encanto, or whatever that movie is, where there's like, we don't talk about Bruno, and he looked exactly like the character, and he was in front of the TV. And that like blipped into people's mainstream and then went away real quick. And I think that if there's a narrative that I want to talk about more, is how much that does for children and for people to develop leaders and people who become CEOs, because you can't be something you can't see. Yeah. And I think that is something we don't talk about a lot. And when we do talk about it, it comes up to being, affirmative action or, quotas and stuff. And I don't think that we don't talk about the importance of diversity in ideas in the way that my perspective as a Black woman from Roxbury, Rosendale, being in a program that sent me out to Wellesley is different from your perspective, you know? And I think that having those conversations and having more voices in the room that don't look alike is something that we need to talk about more, and not in a divided way. In just wouldn't it be great if we could hear somebody else's opinion on this? And that's it. Because I think that too much now differing opinions come off as threatening and as violent and as just wrong, instead of just hearing that maybe that person does have a different perspective and you should just listen to it. And I think that that's something I really want to push, and just be like, just listen to somebody who doesn't look like you for a moment.
For sure. And kind of a follow-up, I said that was going to be the final question, but I lied. What do you want people who are looking up to you as their role model, what do you want them to take away from everything that you do?
I just want them to take away that it's okay to be yourself, and that sounds so cheesy, but just to be unabashedly yourself, just to be dumb. And I remember I saw some TikTok one day of this girl doing something that I do in my bedroom all the time. She was just in the mirror being like, and I was like, and all the comments were people being like, oh my God, why are we all the same? Facts. I do that too. Like, you just put it on the internet. Like, if there's anything I want somebody who's looking up to me to take away, is just to be yourself confidently. Even if people look at you funny, because people definitely look at me funny. And I just keep doing it. I was in the Boston First Night Parade, just racking it up. Like, just on the floor at one point. Like, I saw Miss Massachusetts in it, and I was just like, at this woman, and people were like, yeah, of course Miss North Shore is wilding out right now. And I was like, no, of course Katrina is wilding out right now, because I am not afraid to say my opinions, to be myself, to be the weird. I was a weird kid, and I think that I was afraid to be the weird kid when I was the weird kid, because people made fun of me. And I think now, if there's anything I want people to take away, it's like, be the weird kid. The weird kids are usually the ones who are doing the best things.
And everybody's weird.
Everyone's
Some people
weird.
just hide it better than the rest of us.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, so many people are weird. My boyfriend's so weird. Like,
everybody is weird. I promise you that. Because, like, I'm a weirdo, but I call people weird all the time. They be like, you're weird. I'm like, I know. I'm just calling you weird.
You're
like,
also weird.
We can all be weird. It's cool. Like, it's cool, because everybody, and that's the beauty of it. Everybody has their own thing. I say this all the time because I'm a huge Kanye fan, but, like, Kanye calls himself a genius all the time, which is an absolute fact.
It is a fact.
Kanye is the greatest artist of the last 50 years. We can talk about that later. But
he's weird.
But part of the reason I think that he gets to that point is that, like you said, like, he's just himself.
He's just himself.
Everybody has a piece of genius. What you have to be able to do is recognize it within yourself, and then be so unabashedly confident in yourself that you're able to exploit it to the fullest, for not only your sake, but for the greater good of other people. Because I'm a better person because Kanye decided to put out like 5 classic albums. So you never know what type of impact you're gonna have on somebody just by doing you. So
just by being yourself.
You know what I'm saying?
I heard this lyric in a song where it was like, this girl was like, I was afraid my mom was gonna walk on me. She was Black, and she was like, I was afraid my mom was gonna walk in on me, listen to Paramore. And I was like, I was the Black girl who listened to Paramore, who went to the Paramore.
All listen to Paramore.
Right. It's like there's a podcast called Black People Love Paramore. And,
it's true.
and that was weird. Like, I remember being on the bus and other Black kids being like, what are you listening to? And I was like,
they was all listening to it on the low.
But
everybody was lying.
We were all weird.
Yeah.
And it's so okay. And I think the more that we are just outwardly weird, the more it will help other people.
Facts.
Maybe Kanye a little less, but
we don't have time to get into this. We don't have time.
But I think that's the biggest thing. Is I think if there's anything that somebody could take away from you being yourself, from me being myself, is just, I remember when I went into this new job I'm about to start, and I was scared because I was like, what if people don't like me? What if I'm not a good enough reporter? I remember thinking to myself, as long I'm gonna go into this one, my weird self, my weird, confidently weird. And so at the end of the day, even if I didn't do well, or even if the story isn't great, people will still know me because they like my personality, because they got something out of me being the one to tell them the story, and they can trust what they're hearing. They can trust what they're seeing because they know that I'm being authentic. And that's because I'm not afraid to be a weirdo. Yeah.
Period. Don't be afraid to be weird.
Don't be afraid to be weird.
Where can people find you?
So Instagram at Katrina Kincade, verified.
Blue checks. Let's really talk about it. Stop playing with her.
Twitter at Katrina K News, verified.
Stop playing with her.
That's it. Don't find me nowhere else.
All right, that's it. Twitter and Instagram. The links will be in the description. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a review, 5 stars. Hopefully, if you're watching this on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. You know the vibes. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at _Trev Woods. You can follow the pod at the Global Renaissance Pod. Katrina, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a fantastic conversation. For everybody listening, I will see you on the next episode.